The sound of footsteps echoed through the long hallway of the city concert hall. It was late evening, the time when all the artists had gone home and the cleaners took over the empty space. The shining floors, the velvet curtains, and the rows of golden lights made the place look grand, even without people. In the middle of all that quiet beauty worked a woman named Lena. She pushed her mop slowly, humming under her breath. Her uniform was plain, her shoes worn out, and her hands rough from soap and water, but her eyes always carried something warm, like a soft light that refused to go out. She worked quietly, never complaining. Most people barely noticed her. To them, she was just another cleaner doing her job in the background. But if anyone paid attention, they would have seen that every time she passed by the grand piano on the stage, she slowed down. Her eyes lingered there almost with longing. The instrument looked majestic under the stage lights, smooth black, shining like glass. It was the kind of piano most people could only dream of touching. Sometimes after everyone left, Lena would pause beside it. She would look around carefully, making sure no one was there, and then lightly dust the surface with her cloth. Her fingers would always stop at the keys. For a moment she'd just rest her hand there, feeling the coolness beneath her fingertips. And then she'd press one single key, a soft note that floated through the empty hall. That one note always gave her chills. It reminded her of a time long ago, when her life was very different. When she was young, music wasn't just something she loved. It was her whole world. She used to play an old piano in her family's small home. It wasn't perfect. A few keys stuck and the wood was cracked, but it was hers. Her parents used to say she was born with music in her heart. She had a gift, they told her. A gift that could take her far. But dreams have a way of slipping away when life becomes too hard. When her parents passed away, she had to leave school to find work. The piano was sold to pay bills. From that moment, her hands were no longer meant for music. They became hands that cleaned floors, washed dishes, and carried heavy buckets. Years passed. The world forgot about her music, and so she tried to forget too. But the sound of a piano never left her. Every time someone played on the concert stage, she'd hide behind the curtains to listen. She could tell if a player was nervous, proud, or lost, all from how they touched the keys. To her, a piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a voice that spoke from the heart. One night, when she was almost done cleaning, she heard the sound of a young pianist practicing. The boy was clearly nervous, stumbling through his notes again and again. Lena stopped sweeping and listened carefully. She knew the melody. It was a classical piece, gentle and sad, one she had played many years ago. Her heart started to ache. Without realizing it, she whispered softly to herself, "Slow down. Let it breathe." The boy kept struggling, unaware someone was listening. Finally, he slammed the lid of the piano shut and stormed off, frustrated. The sound of the door closing echoed in the empty hall. Lena waited a few minutes, then slowly walked toward the piano. She stood there, looking at it like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Her hands were trembling when she lifted the lid. She sat down carefully on the stool. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. Then, almost like magic, her hands began to move. The first notes were shaky, but soon the melody came alive, soft, flowing, filled with feeling. The music spread through the hall like warm sunlight touching every corner. It didn't sound like a cleaner playing after work. It sounded like someone who had lived 100 stories, each one hidden in her heart. Every note told a secret, of loss, of love, of hope that never died. For those few minutes, Lena forgot where she was. She forgot about the mop, the buckets, the tiredness in her bones. All she felt was peace. When the final note faded, she sat still for a moment, eyes closed, tears rolling down her cheeks. Then she quickly wiped them away, afraid someone might have seen her. She didn't know that someone actually had. The stage technician, a man who usually checked the lights before locking up, had come in quietly through the back door. He froze when he saw her playing. He had never seen anyone touch the piano like that. He stood there speechless, watching this cleaner who played like she belonged on the biggest stage in the world. When she finished, he didn't want to embarrass her, so he quietly stepped back, pretending he hadn't been there. The next morning, when the staff gathered before the day's rehearsal, the technician mentioned it casually. "You won't believe what I saw last night," he said with a grin. The cleaner was playing the piano, and she was good. Like really good, everyone laughed. They thought he was joking. Come on, one of the assistants said. You've been working too many night shifts. Another added, maybe she pressed the demo button. The group laughed louder, but the technician shook his head. I'm serious, he said. You should have heard her. It didn't sound like someone who just fooled around. Lena, who was mopping the nearby floor, heard their words. Her face turned red and she quickly turned away. She didn't like attention. She had learned to survive by staying invisible. All day, the thought of being caught made her nervous. She avoided the piano completely. She didn't even look at it when she passed by. But that night, when the hall was empty again, she couldn't resist. She cleaned everything as usual, checked the doors, and then stood in front of the piano one more time. She whispered, just one song, as if asking permission. As she began to play, she didn't notice that the hall manager had walked in quietly from the back. He had come to check the place before closing but froze when he heard the music. The sound was hauntingly beautiful. He stood still, listening, his jaw tightening slightly. When the song ended, he spoke softly from behind her. You didn't tell me you could play like that. Lena jumped, almost dropping her cloth. I'm sorry, sir, she said quickly. I shouldn't have. He raised his hand. No, I'm not angry. I'm surprised. He looked at her, studying her face, which showed both fear and sadness. Where did you learn to play like that? She lowered her head. When I was younger, she said quietly. It's been a long time. The manager nodded slowly, still amazed. Well, he said finally, don't stay too late. You've got talent, you know. After he left, Lena sat there in silence. No one had said she had talent in years. The words replayed in her mind all night. The next few days, things went back to normal. She continued cleaning, keeping her head down. But something inside her had changed. It was as if that small moment of being heard had woken up a part of her she thought was gone forever. She started to smile more, hum more, and every night she played again, just a few songs before locking up. What she didn't know was that her secret was no longer a secret. The technician had told more people, and soon the rumor spread through the staff. The cleaner could play like a professional pianist. Some people didn't believe it. Others were curious. But no one imagined how true it was, or how much that truth would soon change everything. Lena had no idea that fate was preparing something for her. Something that would take her from behind a mop to the center of the stage. All she knew was that for the first time in years, her heart felt alive again. When she left the hall that night, she looked back at the building one last time before stepping into the cool air. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and she whispered softly to herself, maybe some dreams don't really die. They just wait. The morning was busy at the concert hall. The sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Lena arrived early, just like every day, carrying her mop and bucket. The air smelled faintly of polish and wood. She moved quietly, greeting only a few familiar faces with a soft nod. Today was different. The staff were all in a rush, voices loud, phones ringing, papers shuffling. There was a sense of tension in the air that Lena couldn't ignore. As she pushed her mop along the hallway, she overheard snippets of conversation. The pianist canceled. Last minute, one staff member said, running down the corridor. What do we do? The guests are arriving in a few hours, another replied, panic rising in his voice. Lena froze for a moment. She didn't know the details, but the words made her stomach twist. She had seen situations like this in the news, but never thought she'd witness one so close. A big performance, thousands of tickets sold, and suddenly no one to play. She continued her cleaning, pretending not to listen. But the anxiety in the hall was contagious. Staff members were on edge, arguing about who could fill in, calling teachers, calling other performers, anyone who might save the day. But all the options were either unavailable or too far away. The clock was ticking. Lena passed by the piano again. Her heart gave a small jump. She almost laughed quietly at the thought. Her, the cleaner, might be the only person around who could play. But she quickly shook her head. It was absurd. Nobody would ever ask her. She wasn't a performer. She had no right to step into a situation like this. She tried to focus on her work, pushing the mop carefully along the floorboards. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. She remembered the way the hall manager had looked at her the night before, surprised almost, impressed. Could it be possible that he might consider her? No, that would be ridiculous. Still, curiosity and a hidden hope kept her eyes on the stage. The technician she had seen before whispered something to another staff member, nodding in her direction. Lena didn't catch all the words, but one word made her pause. Piano. She glanced at the manager, who was pacing near the entrance to the stage. His phone rang and he spoke hurriedly into it. She couldn't hear much, but the tone of his voice made it clear. The situation was serious. The performance needed someone, and soon. For the first time, Lena considered the impossible. Could she do it? Could she really sit at that piano in front of an audience and play? Her hands shook at the thought. She hadn't performed in years. People wouldn't just listen. They would watch, judge, expect. The pressure was enormous, but there was also a quiet voice inside her, one she hadn't heard in a long time. It whispered, "You can do this. You've done it before. You were born for it." Before she could think too much, the technician came over. "Hey," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "You're the one who played last night, right?" Lena's face flushed. "Yes," she said softly. "But that was just a little. I wasn't ready to play for anyone," he smiled. "Well, we need a miracle, and you might just be it." She stared at him, speechless. He lowered his voice even more. "The pianist canceled, and the manager is desperate. You should go. Just play." Just like last night, her stomach flipped. "I can't," she said quickly. "I'm just a cleaner." He interrupted gently. "You were born for it. I heard you. The manager wants someone. You know the piano. You know the music. You could do it." Lena bit her lip, unsure. Her mind was spinning. What if she failed? What if the audience laughed? What if she embarrassed herself? But then she remembered something else. The feeling she had last night when she played alone. The music had flowed out of her naturally, without fear. For a few minutes she had been alive in a way she hadn't felt for years. That feeling, that freedom, was calling her now. She looked at the stage. It seemed bigger than usual, more intimidating. The golden lights gleamed above, the seats stretched out endlessly, empty now, but soon filled with hundreds of people. Her heart pounded, but she took a deep breath. She had to try. The technician nodded at her encouragingly. "Go, I'll tell the manager you're ready." Lena walked toward the stage, her mop forgotten. Each step felt heavy yet strange, like stepping into a different life. She reached the piano and ran her fingers lightly across the keys. They felt familiar, almost like old friends welcoming her back. The manager appeared behind her, looking tense but curious. "You're sure about this?" he asked. Lena nodded. I'll try," she said softly, though her voice shook. He gave a tight smile. "Good, just play." And just like that, the empty hall transformed. The lights were brighter, the air heavier, but Lena didn't think about that. She thought only of the music. She closed her eyes and let her fingers touch the keys. At first, the notes were tentative, careful. She reminded herself to breathe, to feel, not just hit the keys. Slowly, the melody began to rise. The music was soft, delicate, but it carried weight. Every note spoke of years spent in silence, of dreams paused, of talent hidden under mops and buckets. The manager and technician watched from the back. Even they were surprised. The cleaner's hands moved with precision and emotion, each note filling the hall with sound that seemed too rich, too alive, to come from someone so quiet, so overlooked. The staff who had gathered near the stage could barely believe their eyes. Some of them whispered in astonishment, others gasped. The music wasn't just correct, and it was beautiful. It was as if the piano had waited all these years for her hands to return. Time seemed to stretch. Lena didn't look at anyone, didn't think about mistakes or applause. She only felt the music. Her past, her pain, her hope, it all poured out through the keys. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt completely free. When the final note rang out, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone needed to let it sink in. Then slowly the manager clapped. The technician followed, and one by one the staff joined in, a quiet but genuine applause that grew louder with each second. Lena opened her eyes. She hadn't played for an audience before, not like this. Her hands were shaking, her chest tight, but the feeling in her heart was stronger than any fear. She had done it. She had faced the impossible, and the music had come alive through her. The manager approached, his face serious but his eyes soft. Wow, he said. "I didn't know you had it in you. That was incredible." Lena shook her head. "I was just playing. I didn't expect—" He interrupted with a small smile. Expect nothing? You played like you were born to do it, and right now we need someone like you. Are you willing to perform if it's required? She hesitated. The thought of a full audience made her nervous, but she nodded slowly. Yes, she said. I'll try. Word spread quickly. By the afternoon, news had reached the upper staff, and the hall manager received calls from every department asking, "Who is this cleaner? Can she really play?" Lena didn't answer any questions. She continued her work quietly, only glancing at the piano with a mix of fear and hope. The hours passed. She cleaned floors, wiped railings, and prepared the hall as if nothing had happened. But the thought of performing in front of hundreds of people lingered in her mind. What if she forgot the music? What if she stumbled on stage? But then, she remembered the way the notes had flowed effortlessly that first night. She remembered the feeling of freedom, of being alive. By evening, the hall was almost ready. The audience would arrive soon. Lena stood by the piano, her hands hovering over the keys. She looked at the empty seats, imagining them filled with people. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let her fingers find the keys. The first note resonated through the hall. It was soft, deliberate, careful, but then the music grew, spreading warmth and life through the vast space. She played with all her heart, feeling the rhythm of hope and courage in every note. Tonight would be the first time the audience would hear her. But in that moment, alone with the piano and the empty hall, Lena realized something important. It didn't matter if they clapped or cheered. She had found her music again, and that was more than enough. As she played, the impossible felt possible. The cleaner, who had spent years in silence, had become the musician she had always been meant to be. And this was only the beginning. The night of the performance arrived faster than Lena expected. The hall was buzzing with energy, people moving in every direction, setting up lights, checking sound, and arranging chairs. The air smelled of fresh polish, stage lights, and something electric that came with anticipation. Lena stood backstage, her hands folded, staring at the grand piano under the golden lights. She could hear the audience murmuring as they filled the seats. Hundreds of people all waiting, some expecting a famous pianist, others just coming for the music. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering. She was supposed to perform, the cleaner who no one expected to play. And suddenly the entire hall was counting on her. Her palms were sweaty, her knees weak, but she reminded herself of the quiet practice she had done alone, the music that had come from her heart and not from fear. She took a deep breath, letting the calm she had felt at the piano before wash over her. She was ready, or at least she had to be. The stage manager leaned over, whispering, "You'll be fine. Just let the music flow. Remember, they're here to feel it, not judge you." Lena nodded silently, barely able to speak. She walked onto the stage, each step heavy with nerves. The spotlight hit her suddenly, making the hall bright and almost blinding. The seats stretched in front of her, rows upon rows of people she had never seen. The whispers and murmurs faded into the background as she approached the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She closed her eyes and remembered the notes she had played alone, the feeling of each chord, the rhythm that had carried her through so many nights. She let herself feel it again, the way the music had always been part of her, even when life had forced her to hide it. The first note rang out, soft, deliberate, a little hesitant, but honest. Then the second note followed, smoother this time, gaining confidence. The melody spread through the hall like a river flowing, carrying everyone along with it. Lena forgot about the audience, the stage, even herself. There was only the music, and it was alive. The audience grew still. Some people leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound take them somewhere far away, somewhere they had forgotten existed. No one expected a cleaner to play like this, and yet here she was, proving that talent could hide in the most unlikely places. Each note she played told a story of her childhood, of the piano in her small home, of the years spent cleaning floors and hiding dreams. Every chord carried the weight of her loss, her struggle, and her quiet hope. People could feel it without knowing why. The music spoke for her, louder than words ever could. Her hands moved across the keys with precision, yet with a natural flow that seemed effortless. The audience was mesmerized. Even the hall manager, who had seen many performers in his life, felt his eyes mist over. He had never imagined he would witness something like this, a cleaner, playing like she had lived a lifetime with the piano as her companion. Time seemed to slow. The music rose and fell, carrying the hall with it. Some in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. Some whispered to their companions, unable to believe what they were hearing. Lena did not notice any of this. She was not playing for them. She was playing for herself, for the part of her that had been silent for too long. As the piece reached its climax, her fingers danced over the keys faster, more passionately. Each note was a confession, a release, a triumph. The hall vibrated with sound, every seat filled with people caught in the spell of her playing. The cleaner who had been invisible, who had moved silently through the corridors, had become the heart of the hall. Finally, the last note lingered, hanging in the air like a soft sigh. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, a pause that seemed to stretch forever. Then slowly, applause erupted. At first, a few claps, then growing louder, stronger, until the hall shook with it. People stood cheering, some clapping until their hands hurt. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, and yet it was not just applause. It was recognition, awe, and admiration all at once. Lena opened her eyes, blinking in surprise. She had expected some polite clapping, maybe a few nods, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Her chest swelled with emotion, a mix of relief, joy, and disbelief. She had faced her fear, embraced her talent, and now the world was telling her that it mattered. The stage manager came forward, smiling broadly, his eyes shining. "That was incredible," he said. "You didn't just play, you brought the hall to life." She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I just played," she whispered. She felt overwhelmed, unsure of what to say. Words could never describe what she had just done. The audience continued to cheer, some calling out her name even though she hadn't introduced herself. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she realized that music was not just something she did alone in silence. It was something that could touch other people, move them, change them. People came up to her after the performance. Some offered kind words, others asked questions, all wanting to know how someone like her could play with such skill and emotion. She answered quietly, humbly, often smiling and shaking her head, unwilling to take full credit. She had been invisible for so long, and suddenly the world wanted to see her. The hall was buzzing long after she had left the stage. The manager couldn't stop talking about her to anyone who would listen. The technician had already begun spreading stories of the cleaner who played like a professional pianist. Word would travel fast, and soon, Lena's life would change in ways she could not yet imagine. Back in the empty hall, after the audience had left, she returned to the piano alone. She rested her hands on the keys, letting the silence wash over her. She didn't play this time. She just sat and felt the air around her, the echo of applause still lingering in her mind. She realized that she had faced something huge, something terrifying, and had emerged not just unscathed, but triumphant. She thought of her past, the years when music had been taken from her. She remembered the small piano in her home, the nights of practice, the quiet moments of hope she had carried in her heart. All of it had led her to this night, to this stage, to this feeling of being fully alive. Her hands lingered on the keys, remembering the notes, feeling the memory of the music flow through her. She realized that this was only the beginning. The performance had been a spark, a doorway, and now she could step through it. The world had seen her talent, but she had also seen herself. She was no longer just a cleaner. She was a musician. She was someone who could face fear, embrace her gift, and share it with the world. As she left the hall that night, the empty streets felt different. The city lights seemed brighter, the air lighter. She walked slowly, her steps no longer heavy with the weight of invisibility, but light with the freedom of possibility. She thought about the audience, about the applause, about the way the music had carried through the hall, and she smiled quietly to herself. The night had shown her something important. Talent could be hidden, life could be hard, dreams could be paused, but none of that mattered when you finally let yourself shine. She had played not just for the hall, not just for the audience, but for herself. And in doing so, she had discovered a truth she had almost forgotten, that courage and passion could overcome fear. and that it was never too late to follow the music inside you. She walked home slowly, letting the sounds of the city fill her ears. She didn't think about what would happen tomorrow or the next day. She didn't worry about fame, recognition, or expectations. She only thought about the music, the way it flowed through her hands, the way it had given her life meaning again. For Lena, the performance had been more than a success. It had been a revelation. It had reminded her that life could still surprise, that talent could still shine, and that even a cleaner, unnoticed for years, could play like she was born for it. And deep inside, she knew that this was only the first step of something much bigger. The next day, the hall was alive with a different kind of energy. Lena walked through the backstage area, carrying her mop and bucket as usual, but she felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Staff members whispered and glanced at her as she passed, their eyes wide with curiosity. She could sense that something had changed. People were no longer just noticing her as the quiet cleaner. They were noticing her as someone extraordinary. By mid-morning, word had spread that she had performed the night before. Rumors ran through the hall like wildfire. Some staff had watched her play, some had only heard about it, but everyone seemed to agree on one thing: she had amazed them. Lena heard snippets of conversation as she went about her work. "Did you see her hands? She moved like a professional. I can't believe she's been working here all these years and nobody knew. She played like the hall was made for her music." She smiled faintly to herself but kept her head down. She wasn't used to praise and it made her uncomfortable. She reminded herself that she was still the cleaner, still the same person she had always been. Yet deep inside, a small spark of pride glimmered, one she hadn't felt in years. The staff was bustling about, preparing for the evening's concert. This time, a crowd of paying guests would be there, eager to hear the music they had been promised. Lena walked past the piano, feeling the smooth, black surface under her fingers as she lightly brushed it. She had to perform again, but this time the stakes were higher. The hall would be full and the audience would be waiting. Backstage, the manager approached her, a serious look on his face. "The audience will be arriving soon," he said gently. "Are you ready?" Lena nodded slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "I'll try," she said softly. He smiled, as if reassuring her. "You don't need to try. Just play as you always do. Let the music guide you." She took a deep breath and walked toward the stage. The hall was packed this time, every seat filled with people who had come expecting something special. She could hear murmurs and whispers, the faint rustle of programs, and the soft shuffling of feet. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight hit the piano. Lena approached it carefully, her heart racing. She felt the eyes of hundreds of people on her, and for a moment, fear gripped her. What if she made a mistake? What if she forgot the music? What if the audience laughed? But then she closed her eyes and remembered the feeling from the night before. She remembered the music flowing through her hands, the way it had made her feel alive and free. She reminded herself that this was not about perfection. It was about expression, about sharing something she had kept hidden for far too long. She sat down on the stool, letting her fingers hover over the keys. The hall was silent, waiting. And then, slowly, she pressed the first note. Soft, delicate, almost hesitant. But as the second note followed, she found her rhythm. The melody began to rise, filling the hall with sound that was both powerful and gentle. The audience was captivated immediately. Some people leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with amazement. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling every note as if it were speaking directly to their hearts. Lena didn't notice them. She didn't think about how they were reacting. She only thought about the music, the story she wanted to tell through it. Her hands moved across the keys with ease, each note deliberate, each chord full of emotion. She played with all the passion she had held inside for years, pouring her soul into the performance. Every movement, every sound told a story. Of childhood dreams, of loss, of quiet hope that had never faded. People in the audience were spellbound. They had come expecting a performance, perhaps a skilled pianist, but not someone who could make them feel every emotion as deeply as she did. Some held back tears, Others whispered to their neighbors, unable to believe what they were hearing. The cleaner, unnoticed for years, was now the center of their attention, her music touching every heart in the room. The hall manager watched from the side, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had seen many performers in his life, but none had moved him like this. He could see the concentration in her face, the way her fingers danced over the keys, the way the music seemed to flow from her soul rather than her training. She was more than talent. She was pure emotion. Time seemed to stretch as she played. The melody rose and fell, carrying the audience with it. She didn't think about applause, about recognition, or about how long the piece would last. There was only the music, and it was alive. It filled the hall, wrapping around every listener, every wall, every shadow. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the audience didn't move. They sat frozen for a moment, absorbing the last traces of the music. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, growing louder and louder until the hall erupted in cheers. People stood clapping, some shouting in admiration, some wiping away tears. Lena opened her eyes, startled. She had expected polite applause, maybe some nods, but this was overwhelming. She felt a mix of relief, joy, and disbelief. She had faced her fear, embraced her gift, and the world had responded with wonder. The audience continued clapping, some calling her name even though she hadn't introduced herself. She realized that her music had reached people in ways she had never imagined. It had broken through the boundaries of her invisible life, connecting her to others in a profound, unspoken way. The hall manager approached her, his face serious but his eyes shining. "That was extraordinary," he said. "I didn't know it was possible for someone to play with that much feeling. You didn't just perform, you brought the hall to life." Lena shook her head, unable to find the right words. I just played," she whispered. Her hands were still trembling from the intensity of the performance. The manager smiled gently. "No, you shared something special. You gave people a gift they will never forget." After the performance, people came up to her, offering praise, asking questions, and expressing amazement. Lena answered humbly, often shaking her head, too overwhelmed to fully grasp what had happened. She realized that her life had shifted in a single night. The quiet, unnoticed cleaner had become the musician who had captured the hearts of hundreds. Backstage, she took a moment alone, resting her hands on the piano. She didn't play this time. She just sat, listening to the echoes of applause still lingering in the hall, feeling the warmth of recognition and admiration. She realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a turning point. The audience had seen her, really seen her, for the first time. They had experienced the music that had lived inside her for years, and in doing so, they had acknowledged the talent, the passion, and the courage she had always possessed. Lena understood something important that night. Life could be difficult. People could overlook you, and dreams could be delayed. But talent and passion never truly disappear. They wait quietly until the right moment arrives, and when it does, they shine brighter than anyone could have imagined. As she left the hall later that night, the streets were quiet, the city lights reflecting on wet pavement from an earlier rain. She walked slowly, letting the events of the evening sink in. The applause, the admiration, the awe of the audience. It all felt surreal, yet deeply real at the same time. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. She had faced the impossible and succeeded, not just for herself but for everyone who had been touched by her music. And she knew that this was only the beginning. She had stepped out of the shadows, leaving behind the quiet life of a cleaner, and into the light of her true calling. And though she didn't know what the future held, she felt ready to face it, one note at a time. Lena realized that the world could see her now, but more importantly, she could see herself. She was no longer invisible. She had found her place not just on the stage, but in the hearts of everyone who had listened and believed in the music that came from her soul. The night ended with quiet streets and a calm city. But inside Lena, something had changed forever. She knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. She had played not just to perform, but to be seen, to be heard, to reclaim the part of herself that had been silent for too long. And as she walked home, she whispered to herself, a small smile on her lips, "This is just the beginning. The music, it's still inside me. And now everyone will hear it." The days after Lena's performance were unlike anything she had ever experienced. She still arrived at the concert hall, carrying her mop and bucket, performing her usual cleaning tasks. But the world around her felt different. People no longer overlooked her. There were smiles, whispers of admiration, and glances filled with surprise and respect. She felt a strange mix of comfort and unease. She was still herself, yet everyone around her seemed to see more, a hidden depth they had never noticed before. Word of her talent had spread beyond the hall. The local newspapers ran small stories about the cleaner who played like a professional pianist. Videos had been taken by staff and shared online, quickly going viral. Comments poured in from strangers who had never met her, telling her how much they were moved by her music. Some called it magical, some called it inspiring. But every message reminded her that her quiet, hidden talent had finally been seen. Despite all the attention, Lena remained humble. She continued her cleaning work, pushing her mop carefully, wiping surfaces, organizing chairs. It was her life, and she was not ready to leave the familiar comfort of it completely. But she also felt a growing pull toward something bigger, something she had once dreamed of but thought she had lost forever. Opportunities began to appear almost immediately. A music teacher from a nearby academy came to the hall requesting to meet her. They offered her lessons to refine her technique, scholarships, and even invitations to perform in local concerts. Lena listened politely, her hands folded, heart pounding. Each offer made her feel a mixture of fear and excitement. She had spent years hiding, surviving, and now suddenly she was being asked to step fully into the world she had once dreamed about. She remembered the old piano in her childhood home, the long nights spent practicing, the dreams that had been paused when life forced her to grow up too quickly. She thought about the years of cleaning, the quiet nights where music had lived only in her mind. And she realized that she had a choice, to stay in the shadows or step into the light. That evening, she returned to the concert hall after her shift. The stage was empty, the lights dimmed, the air still. She approached the grand piano, her fingers brushing the keys lightly. The music called her as it always had. She sat down, closed her eyes, and began to play. The melody flowed effortlessly, reminding her of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. The notes carried her back to her childhood, her dreams, and her long years of silent longing. When she finished, she sat quietly, letting the echoes of the hall fill the space. This time she played not for the audience, not for recognition, but for herself. She realized that the music had always been a part of her, waiting patiently for the right moment to be heard. And now, it was hers again, fully and completely. The following week brought a new kind of life. Invitations came from concert halls across the city, offering small performances and collaborations. Lena was cautious but curious. She began to practice more intentionally, learning pieces she had only dreamed of playing. Each day she discovered new depths of her talent, new emotions she could pour into the music. She realized that she had been holding back for years, not because she lacked skill, but because life had demanded her attention elsewhere. Now, for the first time, she had the freedom to fully explore her gift. Her first scheduled public performance after the viral video was a small recital at a local community hall. The hall was not as grand as the concert hall she had cleaned for years, but to her it felt enormous. People filled the seats, many of them having heard her story online. Some were curious, some were skeptical, but all were ready to listen. She walked on stage, dressed simply, her hands still slightly trembling. She glanced at the audience, then at the piano, and took a deep breath. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the hall seemed to disappear. The music flowed naturally, effortlessly, carrying emotion and depth. Each note resonated with the stories of her life, of struggle, of patience, of hope that never died. The audience was silent at first, captivated by the unexpected talent before them. Then slowly they began to react. Smiles spread, eyes glistened, and some whispered to each other, amazed that someone so ordinary in appearance could create something so extraordinary. By the end of the performance, the applause was thunderous. Lena stood, bowed quietly, and smiled. She had conquered her fear, and now she was being embraced by the world. The experience changed her in more ways than she expected. She began to receive letters from people inspired by her story. Young musicians who had given up hope. People facing difficult circumstances who needed proof that dreams could survive even the toughest times. Lena read each message quietly, letting the words sink in. She realized that her journey was no longer just about her. It had become a symbol, a reminder to others that talent, courage, and passion could never truly be erased.